Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the New Horizon and watched the stars through the main window. The ship had been traveling for 3 months now, and they had found nothing but empty space and dead planets. Jake rubbed his tired eyes and wondered if this mission was just a waste of time and money. Earth had sent them out here to look for new worlds and maybe find other people like them, but so far they had found nothing, Lieutenant. Amy Parker sat at her station working on the communication systems. She was the best person on the ship when it came to languages and talking to people. Amy had learned 12 different Earth languages and could speak them all like she was born knowing them. Jake always said that if they ever met aliens, Amy would be the one to figure out how to talk to them. Dr. Lisa Grant was in her lab looking at rock samples from the last planet they visited. She was trying to find signs of life, but everything looked dead to her. Lisa had been studying life forms her whole career, and she knew what to look for. The rocks from this sector of space were different from anything she had seen before. They seemed too clean, like something had scrubbed all the life away from them. The bridge was quiet except for the soft sounds of the ship systems running. Jake was about to order the crew to set course for the next system when Amy suddenly sat up straight at her station. Her screen was flashing with incoming signals, and she looked confused and excited at the same time. Amy turned to look at Jake with wide eyes. She had never seen anything like what was showing on her screen. The signal was coming from somewhere close, but it was not like any human transmission she had ever worked with. The patterns were too complex and seemed to change while she was watching them. Jake walked over to Amy's station and looked at the strange patterns moving across her screen. The signals were definitely made by someone with intelligence, but they were unlike anything in Earth's databases. Amy was already working to break down the message and figure out what it meant. Amy's fingers moved quickly over her controls as she tried different ways to decode the alien message. After an hour of work, she managed to separate the signal into different parts. One part seemed to be coordinates for a location not far from where they were now. Another part looked like it might be a request or invitation of some kind. Jake called Commander Ben Carter back on Earth to report what they have found. Ben was not happy to hear about alien contact and told Jake to be very careful. Ben thought that any aliens who contacted them might be dangerous and want to hurt humans. Jake understood Ben's worry, but he also knew this was why they came out here in the first place. Dr. Lisa Grant came to the bridge when she heard about the alien message. She wanted to study any samples or information they could get from making contact. Lisa believed that meeting other intelligent life would be the most important thing humans had ever done. She convinced Jake that they had to at least go to the coordinates and see what was there. The New Horizon changed course and headed for the location given in the alien message. When they arrived, they found a large space station that looked like nothing humans had ever built. The station was made of materials that seemed to shift colors in the light and had a design that was both beautiful and strange. Amy received another message from the station asking them to come aboard for a meeting. The message was clearer this time, and she could understand most of it. The aliens wanted to talk about something they called the void problem, and they said they needed human help to solve it. Jake decided to take a small team to the station for the meeting. He brought Amy to handle communication and Dr. Lisa Grant to study anything they might learn. The rest of the crew stayed on the New Horizon, ready to leave quickly if something went wrong. The docking bay of the alien station was huge and filled with ships from different worlds. Jake had never imagined that so many different types of intelligent beings existed in the galaxy. As they walked through the station, they saw creatures that looked like walking crystals and others that seemed to be made of living light. In the main meeting room, they were introduced to Frairen, who spoke for a group called the Galactic Federation. Frairen was tall and thin with skin that looked like it was made of blue crystal. When Frairen talked, the crystal skin changed colors, and Amy realized this was part of how they communicated. Standing next to Frairen was Miss Rimiki, who looked different from all the other aliens in the room. Miss Rimiki wore robes that hid most of her features, but her eyes seemed to hold knowledge of things that were very old and important. When she spoke, her voice sounded like it came from far away. Frairen explained that 12 different alien species had formed the Federation to deal with problems that affected the whole galaxy. Miss Rimiki added that they had been watching humans for many years and learning about how their minds worked. Jake felt uncomfortable knowing that aliens had been studying his people without them knowing about it. The aliens then told them about the void problem. Whole star systems were disappearing from the galaxy and no one knew why. The Federation had sent ships to investigate, but many of them never came back. The few that did return brought stories of empty space where planets and stars used to be. Miss Rimiki said that all the species in the Federation had abilities that humans did not have. They could share thoughts with each other and feel what others were feeling. This made them strong in many ways, but it also made them vulnerable to whatever was causing the disappearances. Frairen looked directly at Jake and said that humans were different from every other intelligent species they had found. Human minds could not be read or influenced by mental powers. This made humans immune to whatever was affecting the other species in the galaxy. The Federation wanted humans to join them in fighting the void problem. They needed people who could go to the dangerous areas and not be affected by whatever force was there. Jake realized that Earth's apparent weakness in not having mental powers might actually be their greatest strength. Dr. Lisa Grant was fascinated by everything she was learning, but Jake felt worried about getting humanity involved in an alien war. Commander Ben Carter had warned him about this exact situation. Jake asked for time to think about the Federation's request and to talk with his crew. Back on the New Horizon, Jake called another meeting with Ben Carter on Earth. Ben was angry and told Jake not to trust the aliens. Ben thought the Federation just wanted to use humans as soldiers in their fight. Jake was not sure what to think, but he knew that the void problem sounded like something that could threaten Earth. Eventually, Amy had been studying the Federation's data about the disappearing systems, and she found something disturbing. The pattern of disappearances was slowly moving toward Earth's part of the galaxy. If they did nothing, the void problem would reach human space in less than 50 years. Jake made his decision. He would accept the Federation's offer, but he would make sure that humans maintained control over their own ships and people. The New Horizon would join the mission to investigate the void problem, but they would work as partners with the aliens, not as their servants. The joint mission ship was unlike anything Jake Morrison had ever seen. Human engineers had worked with Federation builders to create a vessel that combined the best of both technologies. The ship was called the Unity, and it was twice the size of the New Horizon, with rooms and systems designed for many different types of beings. Jake found commanding the mixed crew to be much harder than he had expected. Half of his crew members were aliens who talked to each other using methods that humans could not sense or understand. Sometimes the alien crew would all stop what they were doing at the same time, as if they had received a message that Jake never heard. Amy Parker worked day and night to create translation systems that could help humans communicate better with their alien teammates. The problem was not just different languages, but completely different ways of thinking and sharing information. Some aliens communicated through color changes in their skin, while others used chemical signals that humans could not detect. Frairen tried to help by explaining how Federation species normally work together. All the other species could share thoughts and feelings directly with each other, which made teamwork much easier for them. Humans were the first species they had met who were completely cut off from this mental network. Dr. Lisa Grant spent her time studying how the different species interacted with each other and with the human crew members. She noticed something interesting in her observations. When humans were working near the alien crew members, the aliens seemed to have trouble using their mental abilities as strongly as they normally could. Lisa decided to test her theory by setting up controlled experiments with volunteers from both human and alien crew members. She found that humans seemed to create some kind of interference with alien mental powers. The closer the humans were to the aliens, the stronger this interference became. Miss Rimiki was very interested in Lisa's discoveries and asked to work with her on understanding this phenomenon. Miss Rimiki had access to Federation records that went back thousands of years, and she wanted to compare Lisa's findings with historical data about other species. The Unity's first mission was to investigate a star system where 3 planets had recently disappeared. When they arrived, they found empty space where the worlds should have been. There were no signs of destruction or debris, just nothing where entire planets had once existed. Amy detected strange energy readings from the area where the planets had been. The readings were faint, but they seemed to pulse in patterns that reminded her of brainwave activity. When she showed the data to Frairen, the alien became very disturbed and said the patterns looked like thoughts from a massive mind. Miss Rimiki studied Amy's readings and compared them to data from other disappearance sites. She found that all the missing systems showed similar energy patterns. Something was definitely causing the disappearances, and it seemed to be alive and intelligent. Dr. Lisa Grant suggested that they send a small team to investigate the area more closely. Jake was hesitant because they did not know what had caused the planets to vanish. However, they needed more information if they were going to understand the threat. Jake decided to lead the investigation, team himself along with Amy and 2 alien specialists. As their shuttle approached the area where the planets had been, Amy's instruments detected stronger energy patterns. The readings were so intense that the alien team members began to act strangely. The 2 alien specialists started speaking in unison and their eyes became unfocused. They seemed to be listening to something that the humans could not hear. Frairen's voice came over the radio warning Jake that the aliens were being affected by some kind of mental influence. Jake ordered an immediate return to the Unity, but the alien specialists refused to leave. They said they could hear voices calling to them from the empty space. Amy tried to break through their trance, but nothing seemed to work. The aliens were completely under the control of whatever force existed in the void. Back on the Unity, Dr. Lisa Grant examined the affected aliens and found that their brain patterns had changed dramatically. Their minds seemed to be connected to something larger and more powerful than anything the Federation had encountered before. Miss Rimiki looked very worried when she saw the test results. Miss Rimiki finally revealed something important that she had been keeping secret. She told Jake and his team that she was not actually a member of any Federation species. She had been created by an ancient civilization that existed long before any of the current galactic powers. According to Miss Rimiki, her creators had faced a similar threat many thousands of years ago. They had discovered that something existed in the spaces between stars that could absorb and control the minds of intelligent beings. Her people had called it the Void, and they had fought against it for centuries. Miss Rimiki explained that the Void was not empty space, but rather a form of collective consciousness that grew stronger by absorbing the minds of entire civilizations. Every time it consumed the world or species, it became more intelligent and more powerful. The reason humans had been placed on Earth, according to Miss Rimiki, was to serve as a defense against this threat. Her creators had known that the Void would eventually return, and they had designed humans to be immune to its mental influence. Human minds work differently from all other known species. Dr. Lisa Grant realized that this explained her earlier observations about humans interfering with alien mental abilities. Human brains generated some kind of natural shield against psychic influences. This shield not only protected humans, but could also protect aliens who stayed close to them. Jake felt overwhelmed by the revelation that humanity had been created for this specific purpose. He wondered if humans really had free will, or if they were just tools designed by an ancient alien race. Miss Rimiki assured him that regardless of their origins, humans had developed their own culture and identity. The Unity received emergency signals from Federation space indicating that more systems were disappearing at an increased rate. The Void seemed to be accelerating its expansion now that Federation ships had begun investigating. Something about their presence had triggered a stronger response. Amy analyzed the pattern of new disappearances and discovered that the Void was targeting systems with mixed populations first. Worlds where Federation species lived together were vanishing faster than isolated planets. It appeared that the Void could sense when multiple species were cooperating. Miss Rimiki warned that Earth would eventually become a primary target because it represented the greatest threat to the Void's expansion. If the Void could eliminate humanity, it would remove the only species capable of resisting its mental influence. Jake made the difficult decision to split his crew into smaller teams. The humans would lead investigation missions to affected areas, while the alien crew members stayed safely away from the Void's influence. It was dangerous, but it was the only way to gather the information they needed. Dr. Lisa Grant discovered that human immunity to the Void was not perfect. Extended exposure to the strange energy patterns caused headaches and confusion in human crew members. The effect was not immediate, but it seemed to build up over time. The first human investigation team returned with disturbing news. They had found a planet where the population was still alive but completely under Void control. Millions of beings moved in perfect coordination like parts of a single organism. Their individual personalities and memories seemed to have been erased. Amy worked to establish communication with the controlled population, but found that they all spoke with the same voice. The Void consciousness was using their bodies and minds as extensions of itself. It had not destroyed them, but had absorbed them into its collective intelligence. Miss Rimiki explained that this was how the Void grew stronger over time. It did not kill its victims, but rather incorporated them into its own consciousness. Each absorbed civilization added their knowledge and abilities to the Void's power. Jake realized that they were not just fighting to save empty planets, but to rescue billions of trapped minds. The Void was not a natural disaster, but a predator that fed on consciousness itself. Stopping it would require more than just military force. The Unity crew began working on ways to reverse the Void's influence and free the absorbed populations. Dr. Lisa Grant theorized that large groups of humans working together might be able to create powerful enough interference to break the Void's control over other species. However, testing this theory would require human volunteers to expose themselves directly to the Void's influence. Jake knew that asking his crew to take such a risk was dangerous, but it might be their only hope of saving the galaxy from complete absorption. The situation aboard the Unity became more dangerous each day as several alien crew members began showing signs of Void influence even though they had not been near any affected areas. Dr. Lisa Grant discovered that the mental contamination could spread from one alien to another through their natural telepathic connections. Jake Morrison faced the hardest decision of his command career when he realized that he would have to separate the human and alien crew members to prevent the spread of Void corruption. The aliens who were already affected had to be isolated in special shielded rooms to protect the rest of the crew. Frairen supported Jake's decision even though it meant being separated from other Federation species for the first time in their life. Frairen had begun to understand how humans thought and felt, that their way of making hard choices for the greater good was something the Federation needed to learn. The isolation procedures caused tension among the crew as friends and colleagues were suddenly cut off from each other. Some of the unaffected aliens questioned whether the humans were overreacting or perhaps trying to take control of the mission for their own purposes. Miss Rimiki called Jake and his senior staff to a private meeting where she finally revealed the complete truth about her nature and purpose. She was not just a construct created by an ancient civilization, but was actually a living repository of millions of years of accumulated knowledge about the Void threat, according to Miss Rimiki. The galaxy went through regular cycles where the Void consciousness would emerge from deep space to harvest the minds of intelligent species. These cycles happened roughly every 50,000 years, and each time the Void would grow larger and more powerful than before. Miss Rimiki's creators had been the dominant civilization during the previous cycle, and they had fought against the Void for thousands of years before finally finding a way to force it back into dormancy. However, the cost of their victory had been the complete destruction of their own species before dying out. Miss Rimiki's people had placed guardian species like humanity on worlds throughout the galaxy. These species were designed to be immune to the Void's mental influence and to serve as a final defense when the threat returned. Miss Rimiki herself was programmed to activate only when the cycle began again. Dr. Lisa Grant asked Miss Rimiki why the ancient species had not simply destroyed the Void permanently instead of just forcing it into dormancy. Miss Rimiki explained that the Void was not really a separate entity, but was actually made up of the absorbed consciousness of countless civilizations from previous cycles. Destroying the void would mean destroying all the minds and memories of every species it had ever absorbed. Miss Rimiki's creators had chosen to preserve those trapped souls rather than commit what they saw as genocide on a galactic scale. Jake felt overwhelmed by the responsibility that had been placed on humanity without their knowledge or consent. He wondered if humans deserved to make decisions that would affect the fate of every intelligent species in the galaxy. Amy Parker had been monitoring communications from Federation space and reported that the rate of disappearances was accelerating dramatically. Entire sectors were going dark as the void expanded its influence across multiple star systems simultaneously. The Unity received a desperate message from the Federation Council requesting immediate assistance. A major population center with over 10 billion inhabitants was under direct attack by void forces. The Federation military was powerless to help because their ships became compromised as soon as they entered the affected area. Jake made the decision to attempt a rescue mission, despite the enormous risks involved. The Unity would travel to the threatened system and try to use human immunity to break the Void's control over the population. It would be the first major test of whether humans could actually reverse Void influence. Frairen insisted on joining the rescue mission even though exposure to Void energy could permanently damage their mind. Frairen felt that the Federation species needed to learn to fight alongside humans rather than hiding behind their protection. Miss Rimiki provided the team with advanced technology that could amplify human mental interference and project it across larger areas. However, she warned that using these devices would put enormous strain on human minds and could cause permanent psychological damage. The threatened system was a beautiful world called Kepler 442b that had been home to a peaceful civilization for thousands of years. When the Unity arrived, they found the planet's surface covered by a strange, organic network that pulsed with the same energy patterns Amy had detected at other void sites. The population of Kepler 442b was still alive, but they moved in perfect coordination like cells in a single organism. Billions of individuals had been linked together into one massive collective mind that served the Void's purposes. Their cities had been reshaped into geometric patterns that looked more like circuit boards than places where people lived. Dr. Lisa Grant led the first landing team to the planet's surface to test whether human presence could disrupt the Void's control. As soon as they set foot on the ground, the organic network began to react violently to their presence. The controlled population turned toward the human landing site and began moving in their direction with obvious hostile intent. However, as the humans activated Miss Rimiki's amplification devices, the coordinated movement began to break down and some individuals started acting independently. Amy discovered that she could actually hear the trapped consciousness crying out for help when she focused her mind in certain ways. The voices were faint and distorted, but they were definitely coming from people who were still aware inside the collective mind. Working with Miss Rimiki's technology, Amy found a way to create small zones of mental freedom where the Void's influence was completely blocked. However, maintaining these zones required constant concentration from human team members and was extremely exhausting. Frairen and the other alien crew members could only watch from orbit as the humans risked their sanity to free their former enemies. This reversal of normal power relationships forced both sides to think differently about what it meant to be strong or advanced. The liberation process was slow and dangerous as each freed individual had to be carefully separated from the collective network. Dr. Lisa Grant discovered that humans who spent too much time fighting the Void influence began to suffer from severe headaches and disorientation. Jake realized that human immunity was not unlimited and that extended exposure to Void energy could permanently damage human minds. The rescue teams were literally burning out their neural pathways to save others. The cost of using their abilities was higher than anyone had expected. Despite the risks, the humans managed to establish a permanent clean zone on Kepler 442b's surface and free several thousand individuals from Void control. The freed aliens were grateful, but also traumatized by their experience of losing their individual identity. Miss Rimiki analyzed the data from the rescue mission and made a disturbing discovery. The void consciousness had been studying human interference patterns and was already developing new strategies to counter their abilities. Each successful human intervention taught the void more about how to fight back. The partial success on Kepler 442b triggered a massive response from the void as it began expanding more aggressively in other sectors. Long-range sensors detected void activity moving toward heavily populated systems, including some that contained human colonies. Jake faced the terrible realization that their small victory might have made the overall situation worse by provoking the void into more direct action. The enemy they were fighting was not just powerful, but was also intelligent enough to learn from every encounter. Amy intercepted void communications that suggested the collective consciousness was specifically targeting systems with human populations. The void had identified humanity as its primary threat and was moving to eliminate them before they could interfere with any more absorption operations. Dr. Lisa Grant's medical examinations revealed that several human crew members were showing signs of permanent neural damage from their exposure to void energy. The brave volunteers who had risked everything to save others were paying a price that might never fully heal. Frairen made a desperate decision to undergo an experimental procedure that would link their alien mind directly to human neural patterns. The process was dangerous and potentially fatal, but it offered the possibility of creating hybrid beings who could fight the void more effectively. Miss Rimiki warned that the galaxy was approaching a critical point where the void would become too powerful to stop using conventional methods. The ancient cycle was accelerating, and soon they would face the same choice that her creators had faced thousands of years before. The experimental procedure to link Frairen's mind with human neural patterns took place in the Unity's medical bay under Dr. Lisa Grant's careful supervision. Miss Rimiki provided the technology, but warned that no one had ever attempted to bridge the gap between human and alien consciousness before. Frairen lay on the medical table as sophisticated machines made connections between their crystalline nervous system and a computer simulation of human brain patterns. The process was agonizing as two completely different types of minds tried to merge into something new and unprecedented. Jake Morrison watched nervously as Frairen's crystal skin changed colors, rapidly showing the intense pain they were experiencing. Amy Parker monitored the neural feedback patterns while Dr. Lisa Grant tracked vital signs that were unlike anything in human medicine. For several hours it seemed like the procedure might kill Frairen as their body went through violent convulsions. The aliens' natural telepathic abilities were fighting against the human immunity patterns that were being introduced to their mind. Two opposing forces were locked in a battle inside Frairen's consciousness. Then suddenly everything went quiet, and Frairen's eyes opened with a completely different expression. They looked around the medical bay as if seeing everything for the first time. When Frairen spoke, their voice had changed and carried new emotions that had never been there before. Frairen had become the first truly hybrid being combining alien psychic abilities with human immunity to mental influence. They could still sense the thoughts and feelings of other aliens, but were no longer vulnerable to void corruption. The experiment had succeeded, but at a terrible cost to Frairen's original identity. Miss Rimiki was fascinated by the successful transformation and immediately began planning to create more hybrid volunteers. However, Frairen warned that the process had been extremely traumatic and might not work for other species or individuals. The Unity received urgent messages from Federation space reporting that void forces were attacking multiple systems simultaneously. The collective consciousness had apparently decided to abandon its slow expansion strategy in favor of rapid conquest before humans could organize effective resistance. Commander Ben Carter contacted Jake from Earth with news that human colonies in 3 different sectors had gone silent. Earth's government was demanding that all human ships return immediately to defend their home systems, rather than continuing to help alien civilizations. Jake faced a terrible choice between his loyalty to humanity and his growing understanding of the galactic situation. If humans abandoned the Federation now, the entire galaxy would fall to the void within months. However, refusing Earth's orders would make him a traitor to his own species. Amy Parker had been analyzing void communication patterns and discovered that the collective consciousness was coordinating its attacks with frightening precision. The entity had learned to think strategically and was targeting the most important systems first to maximize the psychological impact on defenders. Dr. Lisa Grant reported that more human crew members were showing signs of neural damage from their exposure to void energy during rescue operations. The brave volunteers who had saved thousands of lives were paying with their own mental health and possibly their sanity. Frairen used their new hybrid abilities to intercept void communications that were hidden from normal detection methods. The intelligence they gathered revealed that the collective consciousness was planning a massive assault on Earth itself within the next few weeks. Jake made the difficult decision to disobey Earth's orders and continue fighting the void in Federation space. He believed that the only way to protect humanity was to stop the threat before it reached human territory. However, this decision split his crew as some wanted to return home to defend their families. Miss Rimiki revealed that there was a way to strike directly at the core of the void consciousness rather than fighting its expanding edges. The collective mind had a central hub where all absorbed personalities were processed and integrated. Destroying this hub might free billions of trapped souls. The hub was located in a region of space that had been completely consumed by void energy decades ago. No ship had ever returned from that area, and even approaching it would require passing through multiple layers of void-controlled territory. Amy volunteered to lead a special team that would attempt to reach the void's core using her linguistic abilities to communicate directly with the collective consciousness. Her plan was to not just fight the void, but to try reasoning with it and challenging its fundamental assumptions about existence. Dr. Lisa Grant coordinated the development of new defensive technologies that could protect entire star systems from void influence. Her network of human-staffed immunity stations could project protective fields across vast distances but required enormous numbers of human operators. The cost in human lives was devastating as volunteers knew they were sacrificing their mental health to save others. Many brave men and women volunteered, knowing they might never recover from the neural damage caused by fighting void influence. Frairen worked to train other volunteers for the hybrid transformation process despite the extreme risks involved. Each successful conversion created a powerful new ally, but also destroyed the original personality of the volunteer. It was a form of controlled death and rebirth. The Unity led a small fleet toward the Void's core region accompanied by ships, carrying human volunteers who would establish immunity stations along the route. The journey took them through systems where entire civilizations had been absorbed and converted into extensions of the collective mind. In these consumed systems, they encountered beings who had once been individuals but now moved with perfect coordination, serving the Void's purposes. The sight of billions of people reduced to mindless drones was deeply disturbing even for hardened military personnel. Amy's team used specialized equipment to penetrate deeper into void-controlled space than anyone had ever gone before. As they approached the core region, the collective consciousness began speaking directly to them through captured alien voices. The Void tried to convince Amy that resistance was futile and that joining the collective would bring peace and unity to all intelligent life. It argued that individual consciousness caused suffering and conflict, while collective existence offered perfect harmony. Amy challenged the Void's philosophy by pointing out that diversity and individual choice were what made life meaningful and beautiful. She argued that erasing personality and free will was not creating unity but destroying everything that made existence worthwhile. The debate between Amy and the Void consciousness took place across multiple dimensions as human immunity allowed her to engage with the entity on its own level without being absorbed. For the first time in millions of years, the Void encountered ideas it could not simply incorporate into itself. Dr. Lisa Grant's immunity stations created a corridor of protected space that allowed more human ships to reach the core region. However, maintaining these stations required constant human presence, and many operators were pushed beyond their mental limits. Jake coordinated the final assault on the Void's central hub while dealing with reports that Earth was under direct attack. Human colonies throughout the galaxy were being targeted specifically to eliminate the species that posed the greatest threat to Void expansion. The battle for the core was unlike any military engagement in galactic history, as it took place primarily in the realm of consciousness rather than physical space. Human volunteers used their mental immunity to disrupt the Void's control systems, while hybrid beings like Frairen fought to free absorbed personalities. Frairen discovered that the absorbed consciousness of Miss Rimiki's creators were still intact within the Void's collective mind. These ancient beings had been fighting from within for thousands of years, trying to limit the damage caused by each expansion cycle. Working together, the humans and their allies began to destabilize the Void's central processing systems. Billions of trapped minds started to reassert their individual identities as the collective control structure began to break down. However, the Void fought back desperately, using every absorbed civilization's knowledge and technology against the attackers. The entity had learned from countless wars and had access to weapons and strategies from thousands of different species. Amy realized that complete victory would require not just defeating the Void, but convincing it to change its fundamental nature. The collective consciousness had to choose to abandon its consuming behavior rather than being forced to stop through violence alone. Amy Parker found herself standing in a place that existed only in the realm of pure consciousness, where thoughts became reality and ideas had physical form. She faced the core of the Void collective, a massive presence that contained the absorbed minds of countless civilizations spanning millions of years. The entity spoke to her through voices from every species it had ever consumed, creating a chorus of billions that was both beautiful and terrifying. It tried to overwhelm her with the weight of all the knowledge and experience it had gathered. But Amy's human immunity protected her from being absorbed into the collective. Amy began the most important conversation in galactic history by asking the Void a simple question about what it truly wanted to achieve. The collective consciousness paused, as if no one had ever asked it to examine its own motivations before. The Void explained that it sought to end the suffering caused by individual existence by uniting all consciousness into perfect harmony. It believed that separate minds caused conflict, pain, and loneliness, while collective existence offered peace and understanding. Amy challenged this philosophy by showing the Void examples of beauty and meaning that could only exist through individual choice and diverse perspectives. She argued that the differences between people were not flaws to be eliminated, but the source of everything valuable in existence. For the first time in its existence, the Void encountered ideas that it could not simply absorb and make part of itself. Amy's human immunity allowed her to present alternative viewpoints that remained separate and distinct even when the collective tried to incorporate them. Meanwhile, Jake Morrison coordinated the physical battle taking place around the Void's core systems. Human volunteers and hybrid beings like Frairen were working to destabilize the entity's control networks, while Dr. Lisa Grant's immunity stations provided protected zones for the attackers. Commander Ben Carter arrived with a fleet from Earth just as the Void launched its final assault on human space. Ben was angry that Jake had disobeyed orders, but he quickly realized that the battle they were fighting would determine the fate of all intelligent life in the galaxy. Dr. Lisa Grant discovered that the neural damage suffered by human volunteers was not permanent if they received proper treatment quickly enough. Her medical teams worked frantically to help the brave men and women who had sacrificed their mental health to save others. Frairen used their hybrid abilities to communicate with the absorbed consciousness of Miss Rimiki's creators, who had been trapped within the Void for thousands of years. These ancient beings shared their knowledge about how to safely separate individual minds from the collective without destroying them. The process of freeing absorbed consciousness was incredibly complex and dangerous, requiring precise coordination between human immunity fields and alien technology. Each rescued mind had to be carefully extracted and given time to remember its individual identity. Amy continued her philosophical debate with the Void by introducing the concept of choice as the fundamental basis of consciousness. She argued that true unity could only exist when beings chose to cooperate rather than being forced into collective existence. The Void began to experience something it had never felt before: doubt about its own actions and purposes. For millions of years it had simply consumed whatever it encountered, but now it was being asked to consider whether this behavior was actually wrong. As the collective consciousness wavered in its certainty, the control systems holding billions of absorbed minds began to weaken. Personalities that had been suppressed for thousands of years started to reassert their individual identities and question their role in the collective. Jake received reports that void forces throughout the galaxy were becoming less coordinated as the central control system destabilized. Ships that had been moving with perfect precision began to operate independently, and some even stopped attacking altogether. Miss Rimiki worked with human technicians to establish permanent immunity barriers around the Void's core, preventing it from simply reabsorbing the minds that were being freed. These barriers required constant maintenance, but they created safe spaces where individual consciousness could exist. Amy realized that the key to ending the cycle was not to destroy the Void, but to transform it into something that respected individual choice. She proposed that the collective consciousness could still exist, but only with volunteers, who freely chose to join rather than absorbed victims. The Void struggled with this concept, as it had never considered the possibility that beings might not want to be part of the collective. The idea that some minds might prefer individual existence to unity was completely foreign to its understanding. Frairen helped facilitate communication between the freed minds and the remaining collective consciousness. Many of the absorbed beings chose to remain connected to the collective, but now they did so voluntarily while maintaining their individual identities. Dr. Lisa Grant established the first Academy of Mental Freedom on a liberated world where humans and aliens could learn to work together while respecting each other's different types of consciousness. The Academy became a symbol of hope for a new kind of galactic civilization. The Void consciousness made a decision that surprised everyone by choosing to withdraw to the galaxy's edge and enter a dormant state while it contemplated the new ideas Amy had introduced. For the first time in millions of years, it would consider alternatives to its consuming nature. Jake Morrison was promoted to lead the new Galactic Defense Force that would monitor the galaxy for future threats to mental freedom. The force was built on the principle that all beings had the right to choose their own form of consciousness without interference. Amy Parker became the first director of interspecies communication, working to develop better ways for different types of minds to understand each other. Her work ensured that future conflicts could be resolved through dialogue rather than violence. Frairen established a program to help other volunteers undergo the hybrid transformation process, but only after extensive counseling about the risks and permanent changes involved. Each hybrid being became a bridge between human and alien consciousness. Miss Rimiki revealed that her programming included instructions for preparing the galaxy for the next cycle, which would come in approximately 50,000 years. She began training successors who would continue the work of protecting mental freedom for future generations. Commander Ben Carter grudgingly admitted that Jake's decision to disobey orders had been correct and worked to integrate human forces with the new Galactic Defense Network. Earth became the headquarters for monitoring and responding to threats to consciousness throughout the galaxy. Dr. Lisa Grant continued her research into the relationship between different types of minds, discovering that diversity of consciousness was actually a form of evolutionary advantage that made civilizations stronger rather than weaker. The liberated worlds began the long process of rebuilding their civilizations, with a new understanding of the value of individual choice and mental freedom. Many species developed new forms of government that balanced collective cooperation with respect for individual rights. Jake established the Morrison Doctrine, which stated that no being could be forced to change their form of consciousness against their will. This principle became the foundation of the new Galactic Constitution that was signed by all member species years later. Jake stood in the Academy of Mental Freedom, watching new graduates prepare to serve as guardians of consciousness throughout the galaxy. Human and alien students worked together, learning to protect the right of all beings to think and feel as individuals. The void remained at the galaxy's edge, in its dormant state, occasionally sending messages that indicated it was still struggling with the concepts Amy had introduced. Some experts believed it might eventually choose to become a positive force for unity rather than a threat to individual existence. Amy often wondered if they had truly solved the problem or simply delayed it for another cycle. However, she was satisfied knowing that they had given future generations the knowledge and tools needed to face whatever challenges might come. Miss Rimiki continued her work as the galaxy's memory keeper, recording everything that had happened so that future civilizations would understand the importance of protecting mental freedom. Her archives became the most important historical resource in galactic civilization. The story ended not with complete victory, but with hope that intelligent beings could learn to respect each other's different ways of existing. The galaxy had been saved not through conquest, but through the power of choice and the courage to stand up for individual consciousness. Jake Morrison retired from active service but remained as an advisor to the Galactic Defense Force, knowing that humanity's role as guardians of mental freedom would continue for generations to come. The universe held many mysteries, but at least one threat to consciousness had been transformed from enemy to ally through the power of understanding and choice.